Today I'm going to share 5 things I never want in my home as a minimalist. Caveat being, I'm no extreme minimalist, I'm just working at it. And also, I want to explain that these are very specific examples, but each one of them is part of a larger theme. Basically, an example of a bigger strategy of the types of things maybe you don't want to have in your home. Of course, there are exceptions to all these. Everybody has different values and priorities, so this isn't about creating guilt for you if you have any of these. The first one is a wardrobe. And yeah, of course I own clothing. What I'm talking about is the furniture piece, the item that stands on some wall and holds a bunch of clothing. Picture Lion the Witch in the wardrobe. And the reason why I don't have a wardrobe is, of course, I do have closets in my home, so there might be exceptions where having a wardrobe is kind of necessary for somebody. But I do see a lot of people adding wardrobes into spaces even when they have plenty of closet space. And I think this is a symptom of a larger issue. So often we buy furniture pieces for the sake of creating more storage. Adding furniture pieces that add storage into your physical space where you're living all the time, where you're trying to enjoy your surroundings, can actually add more chaos and stress in your life. If you actually need a little more storage, figure it out in an out-of-the-way place, but taking up precious square footage in the spot where you're actually moving around living, I think can be a big mistake. It also encourages you to collect more. The more space you have to put things, the more you will just automatically fill it up. That's why I honestly think on average Americans tend to have more belongings than, say, a lot of Europeans. It's because we tend to have bigger homes, bigger closets, bigger everything. Now, I do think there are kind of exceptions to this in that if you really need a little more storage in a space, adding something that is below eye level, like something low, like a credenza or a low dresser, feels a little bit more minimal so that you feel like your space is more open and airy than having some big wardrobe that takes up basically a whole wall of space deep into the room. But ultimately, the bigger picture concept I'm trying to get across here is don't add unnecessary storage to your living space just for the sake of it, because it'll only lead you to collect more. A second thing I don't want in my home is a fish tank or a fish bowl. Now again, if you're somebody who loves having fish, that's a different story. But I do not plan to have anything like that in my home, at least not anytime soon, because basically it's something that creates more work for me, but that for me, at least personally, doesn't bring much joy. Quite often we buy things and add them to our homes because we think it'll add something interesting, it'll add more dimension or more texture to the style or feel of our spaces. But in the long run, there are certain types of things that actually create more work for us. In the case of a fish tank, you have to take everything out of it and clean it regularly. You have to just do all the maintenance associated with that, make sure it's safe for whatever fish you have. For me, that's just not worth having a fish in the corner of the room. And so again, maybe you're not likely to get a fish tank. I don't know that many people who have fish tanks, but this is trying to be an example of a larger issue. Think about before you buy something for your space, is this going to add more work and effort to my life? That's not really worth it, because so often the impulsive purchases we make do just that. Third, I'm not going to have a standing sculpture in my home. Basically, a big sculpture that, again, takes up precious real estate in my home. You only have so much space, only so much square footage, and I'm not going to use a bunch of that for a statue that eventually I ignore and that kind of fades into the background because I'm so used to it. Now, again, maybe that's a weird example because how many people have like a standing sculpture except super wealthy people. But basically, I don't want to add things to my home that take up more physical space and use up that real estate, because basically your square footage, again, you are paying rent or your mortgage for. That is money. And so when you put something in your space that takes up more physical volume, you are continuing to pay for that belonging. You're basically paying its rent. And so think about, if you're going to add a piece of art, do you want it to take up a bunch of space? If you're going to add some new furniture piece, how much space do you really want it to take up? A fourth thing I never want in my home is word art. And I will say, if this is something that brings you joy, power to you. I'm not trying to judge anybody. Other people really seem to love it. But for me, I think for the average person, word art actually creates more stress and chaos and distraction than it brings joy. I'd rather use some kind of symbol or painting or abstract art piece to evoke a feeling or serve as a reminder to me of something, as opposed to literally having the words like live, laugh, love, or whatever it is. It's like in good writing. You're supposed to show, don't tell. You're supposed to give an example and illustrate it as opposed to literally saying it. And it's the same, I think, with art. Get art that evokes the feeling you want, not literally telling you. Because I think what happens is subliminally, it adds more attention grabbing stuff to your space, which then creates more stress and chaos and stimulation. And when anybody comes to your home, the first thing they're gonna do is read your word art, as opposed to taking it all in, being in the moment to see each other, maybe for the first time in a little while. It just distracts and takes away from the moment. I think there are other ways to remind you of concepts that are important to you or your values than having it pasted to the wall. A fifth one, and I think this is one a lot of people have, are throw pillows that are there purely for visual purposes. I have made a promise to myself that if I have a throw pillow, it's only one that I will actually use to support me in some way or for comfort. For example, on this couch, it is kind of short, so I like to use this big one here to really lean up against, and this little one sometimes I'll put underneath my head. But they're both there because not only do they add a little dimension to the space, but more importantly, they make the couch more comfortable. I actually use the pillows. When you start adding pillows to your bed or your couch just because you think they look pretty, eventually they actually deter you from getting comfortable because you have to pull all these pillows off before you can actually sit down and enjoy yourself. And sometimes you'll even not want to get into bed because you're like, oh, I'll mess up this whole beautiful setup I have. And then it's more effort to relax. So I really think let go of the throw pillow as purely a visual thing. Part of this is also not buying the crappy version of what you really want. Because when you have a throw pillow that's actually comfortable and provides some kind of support, it's actually a nice little tool. But it's when you're just buying something that looks pretty online without actually trying it out that it'll end up actually getting in the way of you being able to enjoy your own home. So that's one that I actually feel kind of strongly about, but of course, take or leave any of these. I'd love to hear in the comments the types of things that any of you do not bring into your home and why, because I'm always trying to think of how can I reduce the chaos, the stress, and make my home a more pleasant place to be in. So now that we've gotten through those, I just want to add on my little random observation for today. If you've been watching recently, you know that I've started occasionally doing an ending segment on my videos that basically gives me permission to talk about whatever I want. Maybe just some kind of tidbit, story, or observation that I have in my everyday life. And today's is about mental blocks and the things that get in the way of getting closer to that minimalist lifestyle that I'm at least trying for. And more specifically, I noticed recently, I was like, you know what? I think I should do a no-buy month. But then for some weird reason, I was like, oh, it's the middle of the month, at least when I thought this. And so I was like, well, I guess I should wait until the beginning of next month. And then I stopped myself and was like, what am I saying? If I'm trying to shop less and stop my shopping other than absolute necessities, why should I have to wait till the beginning of a month just to keep track of it? I can just as easily pick any date on the calendar and remember that date and plan to not buy anything until next month. And so I did that. I was like, you know what? Today is whatever it was. And I was like, 1 month of a no buy. And I don't know, I just thought that was an example of how sometimes these little mental assumptions or mental blocks we make about how we should do things keep us from achieving our own goals, whether that's involved in decluttering or minimalism, or whether that's involved in just anything else in our lives. Like, question the assumptions you're making about what you can't do or why you can't do it. Even if it's something bigger, like I can't try that career, or I would be bad at that skill that I've always wanted to try, or that activity, or whatever it is. I don't know, just change those mental blocks, change those mindsets, and notice it when they happen, because I do that all the time, and I can't think about how many times I've probably held myself back from my own goals just because I feel like there's a certain way of doing things. So hopefully basically you can learn from my mental mistake I started making. Anyway, that is all for today. If you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button. It's a great way to support the channel. And if you want to see more videos like this about simple living, minimalism, and building an empowering mindset, then hit the subscribe button below. That's also a great way to support the channel. Thank you so much for spending this little bit of time with me, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.